course one enjoys the feeling of power. The newspaper can create great controversies, stir up arguments within the community, discussion, can throw light on injustices, just as it can do the opposite. It can hide things and be a great power for evil.
No, that was not a flashback of Logan Roy on Succession. That was media mogul Rupert Murdoch speaking decades ago, long before he launched Fox News. Murdoch could be required soon to testify in the $1.6 billion defamation case brought against the network. This week, the judge presiding over the case saying, quote, if Dominion issued a subpoena for Rupert Murdoch, he, quote, would not quash it. The trial set to begin in 10 days. Murdoch isn't the only one who could be compelled to take the stand. Fox News anchors like Maria Bartiromo, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and Laura Ingraham could get called as well. New York Times taking a deep dive into Murdoch's road to this moment, reporting on how he was emboldened by the U.S. press protections from the start of his career, buying his first U.S. newspaper in San Antonio in the 70s, where he turned a daily paper called The News into what he deemed a screamer. Even then, his own publisher raising concerns that, quote, accuracy was slipping. Here's what Murdoch said about the editorial influence he had over the papers he owned more than 50 years ago.
Do you, for instance, interfere much with your editor's policies?
Yes, I do a bit. I get very involved in the newspapers themselves and in sometimes in public arguments that we're conducting or involved in. But on the other hand, I think that I give my editors tremendous freedom.
The Times detailing how Murdoch built Fox by tailoring his tabloid instincts to the desires of his right-wing audience. In the Obama era, Fox viewers craved something to get excited or even angry about. And Fox gave it to them, even if it meant sometimes airing provably false claims about Obama's background and stoking thinly veiled racism. Here's Murdoch talking about giving not news, but comfort to his target audience.
It's really given comfort and voice to the big conservative, the normal American conservative, working class people, particularly people in the countryside. They love it.
Fox catering to viewers in a bid for ratings, the same apparent motive that led it to platform election deniers and amplify Trump's lies. Joining me now to talk about this is former GOP strategist and one of my favorite Twitter followers, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson. Rick, thank you so much for joining me tonight on The Beat. I'm going to start with this. Most things that Fox does, they don't shock me. And we saw the sort of roots of this 16, 17 years ago when Barack Obama was running. We have an excerpt from the New York Times talking about how Fox chased its audience down a rabbit hole, used all sorts of right-wing websites, falsely reported that Obama attended a Muslim school and that, he had all of this, birtherism. We know this is what Fox does. But I want to ask you this question because it's something I'm often conflicted with as a professor of journalism at Morgan State University. How much of this, because it leads to why they're in trouble with Dominion as well, how much of this is Fox created this sort of racist audience, created this sort of appetite for tabloid journalism and divisive topics? How much did they create? And how much of this was Rupert Murdoch just tapping into what's always been about 35% of America anyway?
There's nothing more powerful as a normative force in Republican or conservative politics in America than Fox News. Yes, there was always a baseline there, but this is sort of like a laboratory experiment where they're trying to give a monster super strength and it keeps growing and growing and growing. Then it breaks out of the lab. And so what you have now is an audience more powerful than the network. They had this arrogant idea that they could always move the audience back into the stall, back into the box. They could make them go back to sleep, but they can't. And now they realize if they try to educate the ineducable, if they try to reform the irreformable, they will be destroyed themselves by the audience. It's the same problem the Republican Party had. They went out, they wanted to activate just enough of the racist vote here and there. They wanted to go out and activate just enough of the populist vote here and there. And then suddenly the people they really didn't like, but they needed, became the masters of the entire party. That's the same problem Fox has right now. And I think that Rupert is too old and stubborn to understand. He's lost all of his power over them. They control Fox, not the other way around.
I want to play you some sound of the Fox hosts lying on air versus what they've come clean about in deposition. Get your comments on the other side.
We've got evidence of corruption all across the country in countless districts. The machine ran an algorithm that shaved votes from Trump and awarded them to Biden. They used the machines to trash large batches of votes that should have been awarded to President Trump. And they used a machine to inject and add massive quantities of votes for Mr. Biden. A lot of the machines, particularly by the Dominion Company, in which Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi hold interests, along with Mr. Soros has a connection to that as well. They actually have a Chinese software or parts in them.
The machines can be hacked. There's no question about that. Their machines can be hacked.
I don't know what kind of bizarre Conehead's theory of injecting mass quantities of votes Sidney Powell was actually working with there. But here's the thing, Rick. You know, we've already seen that the audience doesn't care if they're being lied to. They're still going to vote. But I have to ask you, do you think there's a limit? Just quickly, do you think there's a point at which the audience will either turn on Fox, or if Fox isn't extreme enough, that they'll go to another network or go online because they're getting the red meat that they want?
The latter scenario is what's happening now. They're going out to Telegram, to Discord, to OAN, to Newsmax and other places because they recognize that Fox has contempt for them. They saw in this testimony that was forced by the Fox hosts and staff that they have contempt for the audience. They believe they're stupid, and they believe that they're backwards. And that has driven a lot of them out into even darker parts of the Republican media ecosystem.
Rick Wilson, thank you so much for joining us tonight on The Beat.
Anytime.